It is early morning in New Zealand on Tuesday, and there is a big Path of Exile 2 patch that is just about to drop concerning some major fixes in Path of Exile 2 regarding numerical values and some core gameplay features. We're talking about map checkpoints, passive tree respecking, Trial of the Sekhemas, endgame and monster balance, character balance, and skill and support gem balance as well in today's quick video overviewing these patch notes. So, first of all, they will be adding limited checkpoints to the game, as they talked about last week, and allowing us to teleport between checkpoints in areas. I don't know if we're 100% certain on if this is just campaign zones or Atlas zones at the end game, but if it's added to both, that's absolutely great. It'll also help with the issue that people are having in Endgame where they can't find the rare monsters and they need to run across the map to find that final rare. But if it's a campaign only thing for now, that's also going to be a huge win. Then we also have this right here, which is new. They have heard the community about passive tree respecking, and they are making changes. And once these changes are made, I don't think there's any going back on them. And I agree with these changes. We'll also be making passive point respecking cheaper, especially at higher levels. It had a relatively aggressive curve getting more expensive with character level. We have flattened that curve so it doesn't exponentially grow as much. This should generally result in approximately 40 to 50% less gold cost for respecking between the start and middle of endgame progression. So they're not giving out free tree resets, but they are completely lowering the cost of respecking by, they said here, 40 to 50%. That is drastic, and that should help assuage a lot of the concerns people are having, not only with the nerfing of builds and needing to respec, but also just shifting around builds at endgame. Because right now, swapping around skill and support gems is pretty easy, but shifting around your passive skill tree is very, very difficult. So this is a W change right here, as are the checkpoint changes. Then we have this, which has been a hot button issue. My stance on this has always been it's RNG in the Trial of the Sekhemas, what boons you encounter, what afflictions you encounter, and same with the Trial of Chaos, and that is bad. But I was fine with the punishment that you were getting, even on melee characters. I feel like it's a fundamentally different gameplay style than the rest of Path of Exile 2, and I have always embraced that. Grinding your games, though, disagrees and agrees with the bulk of the community here because they have found a good solution, especially for melee players. They point out the problem of melee players having a tough time clearing the Trial of the Sekhemas, and here is the solution. Honor damage now scales based on distance to enemies. When in close range, you'll take 35% less honor damage, tapering off as you are further away from monsters. That is big, especially for anyone wielding a mace, generally warriors, monks as well with quarterstaffs, or just anybody that wants to get in close as Path of Exile 2 matures. I really hope this and then the bug fixes below really help with how the Trial of the Sekhemas feels for a lot of players. I think there was so much care and effort put into there. Heck, Camille even did a rendition of Azaro's theme from the Labyrinth and Ascendancy in the Trial of the Sekhemas. It's just such a beautiful piece of content. I really hope this helps people's experiences with it much more. So now we also have a bug fix here. Fixed a bug where damage over time was dealing thrice as much damage to honor as intended, and fixed a bug where honor resistance was only applying to 2/3 of that damage. This was confusing for us too. That sucks. That might have ruined some runs out there. I know that there is a boss apparently on floor 3 that is just obliterating people's honor. Maybe it had to do with this bug. I'm not sure. I haven't seen the fight. I don't know if it's a dot effect or a slam. But overall, this is definitely going to help alongside this distance-based change. And then they also improved some telegraphing here for monsters and changed how they work in the Trial of the Sekhemas. Then we move to endgame and monster balance. Interesting stuff here. There's no fundamental changes to the mapping system, to the Atlas, but I don't think those will come for many weeks, if not months down the line. This is more fine-tuning the numbers of the monsters you are facing. So generally, the balance in endgame maps was more punishing than intended, so we toned down the damage in a number of ways and disabled a certain on-death effect where the telegraphing was not as clear as it should have been. I have died to that effect many times. Maps no longer have additional elemental resistance penalties inherently applied at tier 6 and tier 11 on higher maps. It is now consistent across all of endgame. So yes, if you didn't know that happened, you had further 10% reductions at T6 and T11 waystones in the endgame, which was rough. Then chaos damage now also scales less aggressively over the endgame. That has been the primary thing that has killed me in the endgame, alongside projectiles, up until I got my evasion rating really high. Critical strikes from monsters now deal 40% less bonus damage. That is a huge number nerf, but a lot of monsters probably aren't going to be one-shotting you. It seems like this is across the board, so maybe that idea of some monsters just being overtuned wasn't happening, at least right now. At least they're not changing any of those out of whack monsters. And this appears to just be stuff that they're altering across the board, like this right here, the critical bonus thing. Lowered the baseline monster density of breach encounters. Breach encounters were insane. If you have not run into one, they swarmed you almost immediately. It got wild real fast alongside the loot. Primarily by reducing the frequency of the elite monsters appearing, okay? Disabled the volatile crystals modifier. Oh my god. This is the one that's killed me multiple times. I just lost 2 greater jeweler's orbs because of it. Wow. We'll revisit this in the future pending telegraphing improvements. Ah, whoa. That's like volatile dead being disabled in week 1 of Path of Exile 1. Wow. Whoa. Big. Shocking. Purple explosives created by the volatile plants modifier on rare monsters now deal significantly less damage. Okay, I get that. Those were pretty cracked. And the siphons flask charges modifier on monsters, which killed me multiple times, now drains 10 times less flask charges per second. This was unintentionally draining way too many charges. Oh my goodness gracious. I now see why I was losing all of my flask charges very quickly. These changes should result in an endgame that is much more survivable than before, and we will continue to address problematic cases as they arrive. W changes here, essentially. All numerical balancing changes, W changes for the endgame and monster balance. Now we get to this one, character and item balance. The first one is essentially saying, hey, charm slots on belts are not really appearing as much. We have granted substantially higher drop rates to these. You should be able to stack more charms now. Additionally, Electrocute is now 25% harder to build up, but the damage penalty has been removed from the support gem. Very interesting, because I was building up Electrocution on my monk using Herald of Thunder to generate power charges using Combat Frenzy and the Resonance Keystone, and basically getting charged staff for free. I wonder if that'll still be super easy to sustain throughout a map. I'll have to test that after I finish recording this video. Okay, and then added a new lightning damage and electrocute cluster. So new clusters already added to the tree. It is now more difficult to chain freeze enemies by reducing the amount of freeze buildup applied after a freeze has been applied. Interesting. And the Hunter's Talisman noticeable now grants +1 charm slot. Okay, sensible. Skill and support gem balance. So this is where they address the overpowered skills. I'm going to read exactly what they say because they give their definition for it. How do we define overpowered? Basically, it's a situation in which a certain skill is so powerful that players feel no other method of playing the game is viable. Generally speaking, we are trying to do this in a way that doesn't make a build bad, but we can make mistakes. Wow, acknowledgement. Okay, so maybe they did with some of the builds. Like I said, I'm pretty blind on all the builds. Ideally, any truly meta-shifting changes will only happen at the same time as a content patch with a new league to play in. Great, good philosophy. But that doesn't mean we haven't been looking at underpowered skills and support gems. We've got a number of changes planned which should improve some of these skills. The full list of changes will be in the patch notes, but here is a sample of what you can expect. Improvements to rolling, slam, and all shield skills and maces. Bow skill improvements. Wow, okay. Bone spells and chaos damage over time spells improvements. Crossbow skill improvements, especially those at higher tiers, and improvements to some of the underachieving quarterstaff abilities. Ha 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 ha. You cannot get me away from charged staff. You can't do it in Tempest Flurry. Alongside all of those skill gem improvements, we've also done a pass over the support gems. We've added 2 new supports and removed or lessened the penalties on many others, notably the fire, lightning, and cold exposure supports. Added the Tremors support gem, which can be used to give up to multiple more aftershocks to skills with a damage penalty. Added the bidding support gem, which can be used to give more damage to the command skills of supported minions. Oh, wow, very interesting. They're already adding support gems. That's pretty darn cool. There are also some notable nerfs to a few of the remaining overachieving skills. Okay, I'm not going to know about this one really much, guys. I'm sorry if these are breaking a bunch of builds. Skeletal Arsonet's spirit costs now match the other 2 skeleton mages. A nerf to the damage over time component on very high levels of Tornado and Vine Arrow. And Magnetic Salvo can now only use your stuck lightning arrows as opposed to those created by your party members. Ooh, okay. Big nerf there, perhaps, for party play. And they leave with a note saying, thank you for the biggest launch of all time for Grinding Gear Games and Path of Exile as a franchise. They are going to be a little short-staffed because of the holidays for the next few weeks, but in 2025, they are going to hit the ground running and bring out a bunch of new development updates on Path of Exile 2. Overall, I would say this is definitely a W patch right here from Grinding Your Games. It's a lot of numerical shifts, changes just to a few different big systems that people were giving lots of feedback about. I think the biggest one right now, especially for a lot of players who are still progressing through the campaign, is the trial of the Sekhemas change. I think some people, especially who are playing melee classes, were hard locked on progressing to their first ascendancy point, and that generally does suck. I know my opinion is masochistic here, where I wanted it to really feel like a different game mode, but even with this change, where you're taking 35% less honor damage when you're in close range, it's going to feel like a very different part of the game, and this was a good change from Grinding Gear Games. I know that there will probably be more stuff in the new year. I don't necessarily expect many other sweeping changes that are non-numerical to happen to the game. I am a little surprised there were no adjustments to the Trial of Chaos and the modifiers that can spawn there, which are essentially direct ports from Path of Exile 1. Perhaps that'll come in an upcoming patch. I also released a video today talking about the endgame and how speedy it was compared to the campaign, and how bossing is seriously missing from the end game, and that is a shame because Mark Roberts and the rest of the people working on bosses absolutely knocked it out of the park there. I want to see more boss fights in Endgame, and there's a bunch of other stuff that they've received feedback on. I think they're just synthesizing it right now. They're taking all these little fragmented parts that they're receiving from this part of the community of brand new Path of Exile players, and this part of veteran Path of Exile players, and these ARPG players who have only played Diablo 4 before, and they are trying to make a cohesive whole from all of these different opinions. And you know what? I think Grinding Your Games can do exactly that. Make sure if you like the video to hit the like button, and if you like this style of Path of Exile 2 content and all the other stuff that I put out, that you subscribe to the channel for more of it. Thank you so much for watching, my fellow exile. I'll see you in the next video. Stay sane.